Welcome to the Sacred Journey podcast. I'm Elizabeth Marth Tarara, and I'm a certified conscious uncoupling and calling in the one coach, as well as a certified spiritual and emotional growth coach. And my purpose in this podcast is to shift the perspective on midlife changes being something of a crisis to the truth that they are a beautiful opportunity to awaken and a necessary part of our life's journey. I specialize in walking with women who are experiencing disconnect from themselves and who are facing life-changing experiences. And as hard as these situations can be, there is still the truth that these painful times can be the catalyst that can change our lives for the better. Change is what ignites the desire deep within us to reconnect to our true selves and our true divine purpose. It moves us to step up and live the lives we are being called to live, reclaiming yourself and reclaiming your life. So if you are hearing the call to walk this journey, keep listening, because I promise this is going to be good. And remember, life is all about the journey, not the destination. Hello and welcome to the Sacred Journey podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Marth Tarara, and we are going to be wrapping up the Self-Abandonment Series today. I've loved this series. I have loved doing it, and it's going to lead into what my next series is going to be about. So today I am going to be sharing about codependency and giving our power away. So one of the ways women self-abandon is definitely to be in a pattern of codependency. And if you don't feel like that fits the bill, let's move it then to giving our power away. Because essentially, in my opinion, they're the same things. And yet, we definitely overuse codependency so much. And so many people don't even know what it means, right? Which is primarily because there's like millions of definitions of codependency. Codependency, according to Melody Beattie, is a term that got coined in the 1970s. And it was primarily for people with family members who were chemically dependent and getting stuck in the cycle of taking care of them, helping them, feeling needed, et cetera, and evolved where there are plenty of people who have codependent tendencies today that have no chemical dependency in their family whatsoever. And again, those that do. It's not even about really identifying with whether you think you're codependent or not, or think somebody else is codependent or not. It really is looking at ourselves and how we give our power away and let other people have so much more bandwidth in our mind, in our heart, in our lives. And then we allow so much of our energy to seep into things that don't have anything to do with us, that aren't our business, that aren't our lane. And I'm going to include some links to some books. Terry Cole, who I love, she's the author of Boundary Boss, but just came out with a new book called Too Much. I have not finished it. I'm in the middle of it, but it is amazing. She has a term that she's coined high functioning codependence, which is really high functioning businesswomen, moms, gosh, you know what? Just high functioning women across the board. And it is really a great read. Pia Melody, Facing Codependence. She's an incredible author. She actually lived with codependence, as you know, a lot of women who write the books do, but she comes at it from a very different perspective. In my perspective, she goes deep into the childhood parts of it. She has worked as a counselor for codependency for years and years and years down in Arizona. And her depth that she goes into codependency is really incredible. I found it very helpful. And then Melody Beattie is great. Codependent No More. Those are the 3 links I'll include in the show notes. And let's get started. So I do not actually think that we are conscious of codependent patterns and behavior when we are in them a lot of the time. I believe that a degree of codependency is celebrated in our culture. I think it is revered. I think we've talked about this. Women are taught to be pleasing and kind. And can I help you? This comes so much from most religious contexts. And it's good, right? So we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What we're talking about is when we are going beyond and also being aware of our motivation of why we are doing something, right? So back to my point, being kind, helping, getting involved, doing our part. We're taught it religiously, family, culture, social. And so there is a fine line. I think that we definitely teach our people, our kids, to be codependent from the get-go without even knowing it. Putting other people's feelings ahead of yours, putting other people's wants and needs ahead of yours, going to help somebody that didn't ask for it, giving our thoughts and opinions to someone that didn't ask for it, trying to control situations that aren't ours to control. There's so many examples of what codependency is, and it's not just one thing, right? I believe we all have narcissistic tendencies. I believe we all have codependent tendencies. I think it's part of being human. But when it is a pattern or behavior that is showing up consistently, and it is actually interfering in your life and how you live and how you feel, I believe that's when you need to address it. And I think to be aware of our tendencies that may be crossing the fine line of codependency is really important also. So Melody Beattie describes a codependent person is one who has let another person's behavior affect him or her and is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. So I think obsessed can be a strong term. I get it. I get where she's coming from with that. But I also think it can be really important, which may borderline on obsession, when we actually delve into it. For me and for a lot of the women that I work with, the friends that I have, the people that I talk to, codependency is something that we develop, learn, take on in childhood. So for me, I had both codependency and enmeshment, which is where you're so involved. And there are different terms and classifications of this, but I was so enmeshed with my mom. I didn't know where she began and I ended. Like I was an extension of her. And so what she felt, I felt. What she thought, I learned that I needed to think that too, or it wasn't necessarily safe for me. What she wanted, I learned I needed to want. If I wanted something separate from her that she didn't like, that caused me to feel unsafe. So we developed this from a very early age, right? As everything we do, when I look back at the past, there's no blaming or shaming of our caretakers. It's information. People don't know what they don't know, right? Hurting people continue the patterns. This is just being aware and looking back. So, my mom had her own wounds and things just carry on. The point of all of this is that we get to become aware. So we break the cycle. So we get to raise our children differently. So we get to behave differently, change our actions, help our children, if they're older, like mine, who, kind of messed up in some ways, to do it differently. Like, hey, you know what? Actually, there's a different, better way to do this. I'm going to help you with this so then you can do differently out in the world. It's like those ripples, right? We raise our consciousness, the consciousness around this changes because of how we're showing up. The piece really that I'm trying to share is that I brought those tendencies then into my marriage. You guys have heard me talk about this before. And then that became where I made myself an extension of my husband. I didn't know where he ended and where I began. So the other ways I would show up, that's like real enmeshment. But as in the codependent ways is wanting to make other people happy. Like I wanted my mom to be happy, which is a noble, valid thing for us to want to do. The thing is behind the motivation, right? From a young age, me wanting to people please, wanting to make people happy, wanted to make sure that my circumstances were okay, because if people were happy, then the circumstances were generally okay, because that's how I created safety for myself. So it wasn't necessarily a genuine desire. I didn't know this, right? That other people be happy. It was just that I knew if they were happy, then I was safe and that I didn't have emotional chaos and dysfunction around me. Or so I thought. So it's really the idea of when we are trying to control our circumstances I don't believe that so often we even know we're doing this, but it's like a chess game and you're thinking 10 steps ahead. If I do this, how is this going to affect that other person? Will they be angry? And if they're angry, what am I going to say so that I can then control the situation further? And like so on and so on. Again, I don't know that that was ever like a conscious thought. It was such an ingrained pattern for me of trying to control the outcome, who was going to be happy, who was going to be angry. If I shared this win within my family, was that going to make my mom feel less than, or my husband feel less than? Did I need to keep this to myself? How is everybody going to react? So it's really this idea that how you are being is completely dependent on the people. For me, it was close family members, mostly around you. And I noticed that I would even do it with my kids at times. Like if I knew I needed something or needed to go somewhere, but they were going to be upset, I would try and rearrange all these different things so I didn't have to deal with their reactions. And that's messed up. Like that's a fucked up way to live in a constant pattern. I'm not saying it doesn't happen once in a while. That's human, right? For me, it was like showing up in so many different areas of my life. And that was really when I didn't have a sense of self. Like, because when we are trying to make everyone around us happy, or, right, if we're trying to control everybody else to keep them safe, because if they're not safe, then we're not safe. It doesn't have to be happiness. It can be however we're so outwardly focused on other people instead of inwardly focused on ourselves being in our lane, that you don't necessarily have a sense of yourself, which you also may not be conscious of, right? So it gets complicated. And again, I'm talking about patterns that are like a little off the chart, right? Not just things that occur once in a while, that happens. These are like more ways of life. So when we are really concerned about other people's reactions, when we are finding ourselves not being honest about how we feel, not being honest about what we need, what we think, what we want, which 100%, I was absolutely in that group because I felt like I was going to get in trouble. I felt like people were going to get mad. I felt like people were going to reject me or abandon me. Like these are deep-seated things that come from like way earlier than when you're, making choices later on in life. And when I started to learn, always what I come back to, it's this, right? It's like this direct line. It is God and you focusing inward, focusing on God's love, God's direction, God's guidance. And again, if you're new, God represents whether it's the universe, spirit, the divine, however you view your higher power, but bringing it back in, like taking everything that's external, everything that you're looking outwardly for, validation, safety, security, connection, all of which are valid once we come within, and really building my awareness that I'm not even being true to myself. I'm not being true to people that I love because I'm so afraid of what their reaction is going to be. That's not living authentically. That's not living in alignment with the divine or with your higher self. And there's a different way, right? So this, again, no blaming or shaming. There's just a different way to live. And the first step in that is becoming aware. Like, what are your patterns? How often are you trying to help everyone else around you in a way that isn't necessary? Now, sometimes I'll read some of these books and I'm like, damn, like, are you not supposed to even help like a lady on, perfect example. I'm in the grocery store parking lot the other day, and there's an older woman who was pushing her cart. My nanny, those of you who know me, my grandmother who lived till 93, and I just adored this woman, grocery shopped with her all the time, helped her, would give my kidney for her, right? Like, whatever, love this woman. So whenever I see older women, like 80s, 90s, I want to help. So I am in this dilemma, right? Do I go and help her or do I let her do her thing? And I think you can tell, right? You can tell sometimes when someone is struggling. She wasn't struggling. She was doing her thing. And I actually decided not to help. And let me tell you, this took everything I had to be like at the back of my car, not going over to help this woman, because I'm like, but she's older and she was doing just fine. And I thought, she hasn't looked up at me. She's not struggling. Maybe this is really good for her. Who am I to assume that she needs my help? Okay. Now that's an example that you could kind of pick apart and be like, for God's sakes, Elizabeth, go and help her. She was like 89 years old. The point of it still lands. We also need to allow people to ask for our help, because it's another thing we don't do in our culture so much, is ask for help. And of course, on the other end of the spectrum, there's those who ask for help too much and need to learn how to help themselves. But we don't always have to step in. It's not always our place and it's not always our business. What is the reason that we're doing it? When we're so full of ourselves, meaning we're so connected to the divine that we have such a full sense of self because we get our worth, our value from the divine, so we know that within ourselves, then it's like a natural state. It becomes really clear to us when we're meant to reach out and offer our help, or when we're meant to reach out and be there for someone else, and when it's really their place to figure it out. I am still working on this piece, because if I say my truth to someone in a loving way, right? Catherine Woodward Thomas says this. It's very dramatic, but I get it. She's like, truth without love is like murder, because it can be harsh, it can be rash, it can be mean, it can be cruel. People don't generally receive truth that way, and it doesn't go down well. So when we can give our truth in love, it's just, try it, but I think truth and love tends to go a little better. Having said that, it is developing the strength, the courage, the skill to share my truth in love. And when that doesn't go down well with somebody, for me to like stay in my power, calm, knowing that that was like a divinely guided move for me to do, and let them have their emotion around it. Let them have their opinion of me. Let them have their thought of me. And I don't need to try to control it. I don't need to make it better. I don't need to take away whatever it is that they are feeling. Wow. I'm practicing it. I'm working on it. And like, that is still a sting for me at times, especially with people that I love. So when you think about it, where in your life are you giving your power away to other people? How much are you caring what they think about you? How much are you trying to control their reaction by controlling how much of yourself you're sharing, how much of your truth you're sharing? Where are you trying to control their actions, like trying to keep them from themselves, trying to keep them from making bad choices, trying to make them from making the wrong choice, right? Even with our kids, there is a place for allowing them to make a mistake so that they get to learn from it. Now, of course, that depends on your age. It depends on the risk factor, all those other things. The point is still valid. Where in your life are you always helping other people in order to feel validation from yourself? And that's not a bad thing. It just means you're kind of giving your power away to other people for you to feel good about you. So where are you lacking in your life? What could you be doing that would feel really good to you that is about your gifts? We all want to help other people. I mean, that's a beautiful part of being a human. And we all have a purpose, and we all have gifts that God has given us, and we're not all using them. So how can you step more into your divine gifts and help people in a way that God's asking you to help people? Like, are you helping them because you're getting something from it, or are you helping them because that's your divine purpose? I ask myself all these questions that I'm suggesting you guys ask. So again, no blame and shame here. I'm walking this walk, not always pretty. Where are you saying yes when you mean no? Where are you overcommitting because you feel bad and don't want to say no? That's giving your power away, and it's codependency patterns. And where else is that showing up in your life? We've talked about this. Where are you showing up in codependent ways where you're more concerned about the other person than you are about yourself, in your sex life, in your emotions, in your workplace, in your parenting? Again, it's a balance. There's places for it. And then when we're going a little bit out of balance, we need to look at our behavior and we need to grow our awareness. So, like I said, this is our last podcast in our self-abandonment series. So super excited for what's coming up next. It's going to be on boundaries, but in a totally different perspective and viewpoint than what you may be used to. It's going to be women loving ourselves and then in relationships. So stay tuned. Always good to be with you. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you soon. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this midlife journey together. Join me next week as we continue to seek within ourselves to find what we are really looking for, so we can awaken to all the bountiful possibilities that life provides, and then align with the beautiful energy of love within each of us. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. All of the info is in the show notes. And you can check out my website, sacredfreedom.life, where I have my blog, videos, book reviews, meditations, and more. And if you feel so inclined, you can book a complimentary discovery call with me to learn about how you can work with me on your own journey of awakening. See you next week.